Hello YouTube, how's everyone doing? It's Professional here. Today I wanted to make a historical video talking about the Ourang Medan, which is the real ship that inspired the game, Man of Medan. You guys may have seen my walkthrough of Man of Medan recently, but many people do not know the ship in the game was based on a real ship. I know history pretty well, and I actually knew the story of this ship even before the game was announced, and I was impressed they made a game about it. I will be talking about the real story of the ship, what happened to it, and I will also relate it to the game, Man of Medan. There are so many conspiracies about the ship today, and the story is very creepy. The game got some things right on the original story and some things wrong. I will explain what they were and what I think personally happened to the ship. Now, the SS Ourang Medan was a freighter ship that was of Dutch origin in the Dutch East Indies. There are several versions of the story. The first is that the incident happened in 1947, another in 1948. But regardless, the game gets its year right. The game starts out in 1947. Ourang in Malay means man, and Medan is a city, so the name of the ship would translate to Man of Medan, which is why the game was called this. In the video game, the ship was controlled by the US Army and was leaving Manchuria, which was in northern China, but it ended up in the Dutch East Indies. To this day, we don't know where the ship was going or where it even departed from, but from the game, we know its destination was San Francisco. The location of the incident was the Strait of Malacca, which is in between modern-day Malaysia and Indonesia. So what was the incident? What happened on the ship? The SS Ourang Medan started sending out an SOS in Morse code. The message stated this as follows: all officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly hull crew dead. Then, after a brief pause, there was one final message which said, I die. After that last message, the signal went dead, silence. The SOS was picked up by several ships in the region, as well as British and Dutch listening posts. In the game, we actually see the SOS operator, and we can find his note of the SOS he sent, which is very similar to the actual message, and on the back it says the infamous, I die. The Silver Star, an American merchant ship, had gone to investigate and help the ship. They had actually located the ship. They sent out signals to the Medan, hoping to get some kind of response. But there was no response back. Dead silence. Fearing the worst, the crew of the Silver Star had boarded the Medan. When they got on the deck, they saw bodies everywhere. The sailors' faces were twisted with a horrified look, their mouths open like they were screaming before their deaths. Their arms were also stretched out like they were trying to grab onto something. It seemed that they were in some kind of terrible pain before their deaths. This is accurate to the game, where we play the flashback in 1947 on board the ship, where we see their terrified faces. But what makes the story even more creepy is the fact that there was no sign of foul play on the bodies. There was no damage to them. They were just all dead. In the video game, it is different, as many of the bodies that we find appear to have gone through some kind of struggle, or have bullet holes in them, but this is deeper in the ship. As the crew of the Silver Star explored the ship, they found no survivors. Everyone was dead, including the captain, and the SOS operator was found dead at his station, with his finger on the machine. Even the only dog on board the ship was found dead. As the crew went deeper into the ship, they found more bodies, and they felt a chill in the air. As topside, it was well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but down below, it was much more colder, with temperatures in the 40s. The Silver Star's crew concluded that there were no survivors, and they had agreed to tow the ship back to shore to investigate. Suddenly, they noticed that there was smoke coming from the number 4 hold. They decided to cut the tow and get back to the Silver Star. This saved their lives, as moments later the ship exploded and it sunk to the bottom of the ocean. This is the biggest difference between the real story and the game. In the game, there was no explosion on the ship. Instead, it drifted at sea for over 70 years. Any evidence of what happened on the Ourang Medan was lost with the explosion, and the ship's wreckage sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And that is the story of the Ourang Medan. But what is the explanation? What happened on board that ship, and what caused the explosion? There are many conspiracies. One of them is aliens, which I highly doubt, as it just does not make sense to me. Another one is something paranormal, which I do not believe is the explanation either. Another one is that the waters were cursed. However, if this was the case, then why did it not happen to other ships? The Strait of Malacca is one of the busiest sea routes in the world. A more popular explanation is that it was carbon monoxide poisoning. This theory states that something went wrong with the ship's boiler, which this could also explain the explosion. However, if this was the case, the survivors would not have been in such pain prior to this, as carbon monoxide poisoning gives off headaches and stomach pain, but it is not consistent with what was seen in the bodies of the crew. So what is the explanation? In Man of Medan, the explanation is Manchurian gold. Manchurian gold is behind all the evil on the ship. It is not actual gold, but that is the code name for the weapon. What is Manchurian gold, and what does it do? Manchurian Gold is a bioweapon that was developed in China either during World War II or right after it. It releases a thick yellow mist, and people who breathe it in begin to experience frightening hallucinations. These hallucinations are so dangerous that they can kill over them, not realizing what they are doing. This was the fate of the crew in Man of Medan, as during the storm, there was an electrical disruption in the lower levels of the ship, and it hit Cargo Hold 2, where the weapon was being stored. The gas leaked, and the first person who came in contact with it was most likely the sergeant, as he was supervising the container being loaded on the ship, and he had access to that level. In the prologue, you can see him holding a Thompson submachine gun and reloading it. Then he chases something down the hallway that isn't there. Then a moment later, you hear gunshots and see a group of soldiers gunned down. The fates of the rest of the crew was as follows. They either killed themselves or killed each other in fear. They also shot down a rescue plane coming for them, hallucinating it to be something else. At least 3 known crew members realized it was either the gas or something bad was happening. This includes the SOS operator, but he probably did not know what the gas was as it was classified, and the doctor who hid in the locker. He most likely suffocated. And then lastly, one soldier who hid in the storage container. He had a gas mask on, which indicates he knew what it was, and he most likely suffocated in the container. The hallucinations appear to be based on something the victim has seen or was important to them. The sergeant had most likely fought in World War II. Maybe he saw enemy soldiers running at him. He shot his own crew members, seeing them as the enemies. Joe, one of the main characters in the prologue, keeps seeing a child, but this is based off the photo of his son. Charlie sees the fortune teller, who he had contact with before. Fliss sees undead soldiers, based on the body she saw on the ship. Conrad sees a woman based on the poster that he saw. Julia sees Alex's face, her fiancé, on numerous monsters. Alex can see a 2-headed monster if he looks into the casket. This is based on the body that he saw. As for Fliss's hallucinations with the Grim Reaper, I think I have an explanation for this scene. This scene happened in Cargo Hold 2, where the Manchurian Gold was stored. This would be where it was centered, where it would be the most of the gas, and create the worst hallucinations in this area. So she not only hallucinated the figure, but the whole room. I think it is based on her religious beliefs. If you listen to her early in the story, she believes that disturbing the dead, specifically the plane crash, can cause very bad luck, curses even. This room may be based on her religious beliefs, as there is a book of religious text also in here. Olsen, the pirate, starts hallucinating his own greed. He believes that there is an actual treasure, and that everyone is out to cut him out of it, that they're going to take the treasure from him. While this is not confirmed, it appears that Manchurian Gold is only effective on those that do not realize it is all hallucinations. Once the characters realize that the hallucinations are not real, they start seeing them less. This may explain why Conrad only saw the old woman for a few seconds near the end of the game, and then went right back to a skull. It's because he realized she wasn't real. This is from earlier, where he was chased by the hallucination for many minutes. You can see it was just Fliss following him. It could also explain why he did not hallucinate at the end, despite Olsen smashing the Manchurian Gold open. However, Manchurian Gold has another effect. If you breathe in some of it, you hallucinate, but if you breathe in too much of it, you suffer a heart attack that is fatal. This can happen 2 times in the story, with Joe dying of a heart attack or Charlie after being in the room with the gas, and Olsen dying from breathing it in too much. Manchurian Gold in the game is based on a theory that the ship in reality was carrying something it was not supposed to be. I think this is the real cause of the deaths on board the ship. Not in the way Man of Medan showed it with the hallucinations, but what if the ship had some kind of chemical weapon on board, and during the voyage it somehow leaked? This gas could have been fatal and killed the crew on contact. The explosion may have been an attempt by a government to cover up the evidence. Some people suggest the ship never existed and the story is false, because the ship was never registered anywhere. However, this supports the chemical weapon theory. Weapons like this would have been illegal under the Geneva Convention. That is why the ship was not registered, so it couldn't be found. The ship in-game is a Dutch ship. We can see this from the engine, which was made in the Netherlands. However, it was controlled by the US Army. This was 1947, right at the start of the Cold War. The US government and the Soviet government were trying to get any kind of weapons that would give them an advantage over each other. It didn't matter to them what it was. But let's say this theory is true. Whatever this weapon was, why was it in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a freighter ship? Why was it supposedly being sent to the US? Because it was not made by the US. The theory that I believe, and it's a pretty popular one on the internet, is that it came from Unit 731. What was Unit 731? Unit 731 was a covert Japanese biological and chemical weapons laboratory. This was a very evil place. The Japanese during World War II were manufacturing dangerous biological and chemical weapons here. These included gas, germ warfare. They would kidnap and experiment on people. They would freeze people to death to see how much cold a person can take. They would even test flamethrowers on people. Victims of this were often people, civilians, kidnapped, or prisoners of war. Unit 731 was responsible for about 3,000 deaths from experiments, 10,000 additional prisoner deaths, and a minimum of 200,000 to 400,000 deaths from biological warfare. The biological warfare this place had developed was so dangerous that the Japanese deployed it at the Zhejiang Jingxi campaign in 1942. It killed their own troops as well. It infected thousands of Chinese soldiers and civilians, as well as killing at least 1,700 Japanese soldiers, with an additional 10,000 sick. This site was run by the Japanese Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. Surgeon General Shiro Ishii was the director of this unit. He was a very evil man who had no value for human life. Chances are you probably never learned about this place in schools. Unit 731 should be taught in schools. I never learned about it, and I took several history courses in college. But all this background on Unit 731, why would the US have a weapon from there? Because when the war was ending, the Japanese ordered all buildings destroyed and all prisoners killed to cover up the evidence of what they were doing. They were not able to destroy all the buildings, as many still stayed intact. This was in fear that the Red Army that was pushing down south would take the labs. But where was Unit 731? Pingfang Harbin, Manchuria. Most of the scientists responsible for this terrible war crimes that Unit 731 committed were given immunity. They were not charged with anything, on the condition that they surrender all their research to the US government, who considered the research valuable. Most of the scientists, including Shiro Ishii, they went free. The US government took control of most of Unit 731's research, and possibly weapons as well. This would explain why the ship was trying so hard to hide itself. It left Manchuria, the same region where that lab was. It would explain the route the ship was taking in the game. If you look at the map, the ship could have taken a straight route to San Francisco, but decided to go all the way around to avoid detection. Weapons like Manchurian gold would have been illegal under the Geneva Convention. A document found in a safe on the ship confirms this as well. Manchurian gold, while it is not confirmed it came from Unit 731 in the game, I believe whatever the weapon was that the ship was carrying was made by them. And if the real ship was carrying some kind of weapon, it was definitely from them. The US Coast Guard kept records of the ship in the 50s, and the American CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, received a letter from C.H. Mark Jr. asking the director if he thinks the ship's incident dealt with anything from the unknown. The director's assistant replied with a dismissive tone. The letter was made public in 2003. This supports the idea that the ship was real, and the fact that the CIA and Coast Guard would even keep records on it, and that a story involving so many people, no one would come out and say it was fake, especially from the people involved in the search and rescue. That points to the idea that the ship was in fact real. However, to this day, we still probably will never know what truly happened aboard the Ourang Medan, or even if the ship existed. What do you guys think of it? Do you have an explanation different from my own? If so, what is it? If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. If you're new to my channel, enjoy my content, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, everyone.